He took the foil off of this bottle and put it on my ring finger, and I had only been with him like days, or maybe it was weeks at the time. Yeah, it was probably about a few weeks, but it just felt very intense. But we weren't doing normal life stuff. We weren't like stuck in traffic with each other. We weren't going to the grocery store and doing life. We were like hiding in these places around the world. He has so many homes, and so we'd be in one of those homes or my home at the time, and it would be like a bubble, like we were in this little bubble of secrecy, and it felt like a warm glow, as we would say. Just music and the kind of books that we both loved and poetry that we both knew by heart, and it felt like a dream. It felt like absolute magic.
So while you're dating, I take it you're dating at this point, right?
Yeah, sorry,
while you're falling in love, you're also dating, right? Okay.
Yes.
Did there come a time early on that you ended up going to his Bahamas island?
Yes. So shortly after, we, I think, started dating October of 2011, and as I mentioned, this bubble, where he'd come over to my house and not leave for like 3 or 4 days, just smoking cigarettes and playing music and reading poetry to me or painting me or, just talking. And then he would disappear. And there'd be just no way to get a hold of him, no way to contact him. At first, I didn't really think anything about it, but he disappeared at one point, and then came back and said he was dealing with some health issue, and would I join him in the Bahamas? And I think that's when I learned he had an island, and I was on a trip with a friend of mine in Spain, and it was for the holidays, and I kind of rerouted my trip so I could come and land in LA landing in Miami instead of LA, so I could go and meet him on the island. And he had Keenan come and meet me on that trip, like in Miami. I get off one plane, get onto another, and go and join him on his private island. And I noticed he was drinking Beck's and tea, like lots of tea. And I didn't foolishly think anything of it. I just, thought the man really, seriously, I missed it before, but really, really loves tea. And we had this beautiful, I don't know, less than a week probably, trip in the Bahamas, a private island, beautiful sandy beaches. It's a scene that you just don't, I had never experienced anything like that. It was a beautiful place, a beautiful time, and I fell head over heels in love with this man.
So after the Bahamas, I assume you came back, and are we talking now early 2012?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what were you doing work-wise while you were dating him in this early stage?
What I always do, I would be taking job to job to job, going from one movie to the next, mostly not filming in LA. So weirdly, you live in LA to go shoot on location in other places. So when I was in town, we would go back to this bubble, like insular bubble with beautiful, blaringly loud music and no one else and nothing else. And then I'd go off to work. And so would he. Eventually, yeah, he left to shoot Lone Ranger, I believe.
Okay. Now, we've heard a little bit about Lone Ranger, and that's about mid-2012, is that right, when he was shooting that?
That sounds right, mid-2012, yeah.
And were you shooting anything at that time?
I was shooting...
Machete Kills?
I believe I was shooting Machete Kills in Austin. I had a small part in a Robert Rodriguez film that shot in Austin. But I think Johnny was shooting and then having some time off, and there was just a lot of travel, a lot of movement. So.
And so what, if any, visiting did you do with Johnny while he was on his set for Lone Ranger, and where was he?
Well, he was filming all over the Southwest, and at some point I came to visit him and on one of his locations, and I would stay in the house because I couldn't really, occasionally I would leave with his security guards, but I didn't really have anything to do but visit him for a few days. So I'd cook and kind of stay at home and paint or whatever and wait for him to come home and have dinner ready. And we would have these little bubbles, but kind of scattered throughout the Southwest as he was filming. And at the time, Johnny had, when I first arrived at one of these locations, it was the first time that Johnny told me that he had had a health issue, something with his liver, and that he wasn't, that's why he was not drinking. He was drinking a lot of tea, like a lot of tea.
Okay. And so we've heard a little testimony about boots. What, if anything, did you do to help Johnny with his boots?
Well, I mean, I suppose that I took off his boots and it made an impression on him, and I was happy to, anything I can do to show love. Certainly how I felt about him. But if he wanted to take off his own boots, he certainly could.
Did you buy Mr. Depp any knives during that time period?
Objection leading. Sustained.
What, if anything, did you do with respect to knives during the time period you were with him in the Lone Ranger?
Objection leading.
What, if anything?
Overruled.
Johnny had a thing for turquoise, and that eventually, being in the Southwest, it can happen really quickly. I also too really love turquoise, and he has he loved knives. He loves a lot of things. When Johnny loves things, he does it a lot, lots of it. So he had these daggers that he had given me that they were beautiful in design, and they're long curved daggers, and he just talked a lot about knives, had a knife and gun collection, and was quite proud of it. And at some point, I don't really remember exactly when it was, but at some point I picked up what I thought was a really beautiful turquoise handled knife, and I had it engraved with a saying that Johnny would say to me all the time, which I thought was romantic, as funny as that is to say now.
And what was the expression, the saying?
Until death, hasta la muerte in Spanish.
Now, by the time that you're visiting Mr. Depp during his shooting of Lone Ranger in the June through August 2012 timeframe, what, if any, relationship has he developed with your family?
Oh, well, starting really early on, Johnny was so kind, so generous to my family, but especially my mom and dad. He met my dad, and my dad's a big personality. He's a rowdy guy, and Johnny just all of a sudden, I had never noticed, Johnny have a southern, all of a sudden Johnny had this southern accent and was really like buddies with him, and they really seemed to get along very well. They're, just like instantly he was giving my dad gifts, he gave him guns, he gave him knives. They had this, Johnny just really just showered my dad, and my dad's a working man, salt of the earth guy, and he was just like, floored. He's getting all these amazing gifts and being invited to come on to these locations, and Johnny's this big movie star, and my dad was just like, I think my dad would have married him himself, not if I hadn't. And he just instantly He gave my mom jewelry, brought her out to come and see me while I was visiting Johnny on Lone Ranger in some part of the Southwest. I think it was Colorado. He gave her this beautiful turquoise necklace, and I mean, they were definitely taken by him.
And what, if any, relationship had Mr. Depp forged with Whitney by this time, your sister?
I believe the relationship came a little bit later as they got to know each other, but he did the same thing with my sister and just really found a bond with them that, you know, was you know, he tried to do anything and everything he could to make them feel like special, and they did. You know, my mom, my dad, and my sister.
And what, if any, relationships did Mr. Depp form with your friends?
Well, Johnny's so generous and can be this really, like, overly generous almost, you know, like showering you with gifts and compliments and just, I mean, like, you know, and he has access and means to really, you know, we're not talking about giving you a card. We're like talking about just these like extravagant trips or these extravagant gestures, and it's a lot. And he did that with my close friends. I relied heavily on my friends and had a pretty strong support network with them, and he really just showered them with generosity and love and light, and invited them to come to these exotic places and flew people here and there. I mean, he's incredibly generous.
So going back to the filming of The Lone Ranger, what, if anything, did Mr. Depp do with respect to a horse?
Objection leading.
What, if anything?
Overruled.
Johnny at one point insisted on buying me a horse, and I, of course, said that's extravagant. There's no way I could accept that. That's how will I take care of that horse? You know, it's so extravagant. So I said no, of course. Eventually, he got a hold of my dad and worked it out with my dad, like what kind of horse to buy, and then showed me a picture of this horse and said, "It's yours. It's coming here." I think it was being transported, and he said, you know, that he had my dad's help on it, picking it out. And you know, I grew up on my dad's horses. You know, I grew up riding with my dad, so you know, I had resisted for I think about like a month and a half or something of him kind of bringing up the idea and me saying, "That's a crazy gift. No, thank you. No, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't accept." To all of a sudden I had a colt.
So